Most people imagine the world of Jesus as a place frozen in religious imagery, robes, sandals, sermons, and miracles floating in a distant spiritual past. But for the people who actually lived there, daily life wasn't shaped by theology. It was shaped by survival, by money, or more accurately, by the constant absence of it. The land where Jesus was born wasn't just spiritually tense, it was economically suffocating. One of the most unequal systems the ancient world had ever produced was pressing down on ordinary people every single day. This is where faith, power, and money collided, and nothing functioned the way it was supposed to. At the start of the 1st century, Judea existed inside the Roman Empire, an empire built not on inclusion, but on extraction. Rome didn't conquer lands to develop them, it conquered lands to drain them. Wealth flowed in one direction only, away from the provinces and toward the center of power. Judea was one of those outer edges, and that mattered, because Judea wasn't rich. It was fragile, it's mostly rural. Dependent on agriculture that barely produced enough to survive, most families lived on tiny plots of land. There were no surplus reserves, no backup plans. When a harvest failed, it didn't mean lower income, it meant hunger. Rome ruled through distance and delegation. Local kings like Herod governed with Roman permission. After his death, Roman prefects took control. Their responsibility wasn't public welfare, it was stability and revenue. Keep the peace, keep the money moving. And the engine that powered everything was taxation. This wasn't taxation as we understand it today. There was no connection to profit or success. You didn't pay because you earned more. You paid because you existed. Land taxes, crop taxes, head taxes, road tolls, market fees, and on top of Roman demands, religious obligations still applied. Failed to pay, and consequences were immediate. Tax collection wasn't handled by a neutral bureaucracy. It was outsourced to local contractors, tax farmers who paid Rome up front for the right to collect. Whatever they extracted beyond that was their profit. Abuse wasn't corruption. It was the business model. When people couldn't pay, they borrowed. Debt became unavoidable. And unlike modern systems, there was no protection, no bankruptcy, no forgiveness mechanism. Accumulated rapidly, land was used as collateral. One bad season could erase generations of stability. The pattern repeated endlessly. A farmer plants. Weather turns, crops fail. Taxes remain due. Loans are taken. Interest grows. Land is seized. The farmer becomes a tenant on land that once belonged to his family or disappears entirely. This wasn't accidental, it was structural. Over time, land concentrated in fewer hands. Estates grew. Small farmers vanished. Wealth gathered around elites connected to Rome and temple leadership. Poverty wasn't a failure of effort. It was a predictable outcome of the system itself. And there was no safety net. Lose your land, and you lost your future. No welfare, no public housing, no support beyond family and limited charity. When entire communities collapsed at once, nothing stepped in to catch them. Debt didn't just strip wealth, it stripped identity. This was the world Jesus entered. And it's important to be clear, people weren't poor because they were immoral or lazy. They were poor because the system required a permanent underclass. Rome needed surplus, elites needed rent, institutions needed revenue. And the pressure settled on those least able to absorb it. This pressure created volatility. Judea wasn't calm, it was explosive. Uprisings were common. Banditry wasn't random crime, it was economic desperation. Movements promising relief and reversal appeared constantly. Messianic ideas don't emerge in comfort. They emerge when systems collapse inward. So when people heard teachings about forgiveness, release, and justice, they didn't hear poetry, they heard survival. Forgiveness wasn't just emotional, it meant debt cancellation. Release meant escape, and escape was almost impossible. The Roman system wasn't designed to be fair, it was designed to be efficient. Stability mattered more than lives. Order mattered more than justice. People worked harder and fell deeper into dependency. Growth benefited a few and crushed the rest. Everyone knew it. That's why hope itself became dangerous, because once people stop believing suffering is inevitable, systems lose control. To understand just how trapped people felt, you have to look at the one institution meant to protect them, the temple. Most modern viewers imagine the Jerusalem temple as purely religious. In reality, it was also one of the most powerful financial institutions in the region. It functioned as a treasury, a tax center, and an economic gatekeeper, all wrapped in sacred authority. Every adult male owed an annual temple tax. It had to be paid in a specific silver coin. That meant money exchange, fees, markups, profit built directly into worship. Animals for sacrifice were sold at approved prices. Even the poor had to pay, just in smaller amounts. Religion didn't replace Roman extraction. It layered itself on top of it. And here's the tension. Temple leadership was deeply aligned with Roman power. High priests weren't chosen by the people. They were approved by Rome. Stability mattered more than righteousness. The institution that claimed moral authority benefited from the same system that impoverished its people. And people noticed. By the 1st century, resentment toward temple elites was widespread. Not rejection of faith, rejection of hypocrisy. This is where Jesus becomes dangerous. He didn't speak outside the system. He spoke directly into its wounds. Debt language, labor imagery, landowners, creditors. These weren't metaphors. They were daily reality. And then came the moment that crossed the line. It's the disruption of the temple. When Jesus overturned the tables, it wasn't symbolic anger. It was economic confrontation. He wasn't attacking prayer. He was attacking a system that monetized access to God. He called it robbery because extraction had replaced justice. That was unacceptable. Rome tolerated belief. It tolerated critique. What it didn't tolerate was instability, especially during crowded festivals. Temple leaders understood the risk. A narrative that challenged legitimacy was more dangerous than weapons. The conflict wasn't theological. It was political and economic. Rome could handle suffering, couldn't handle disbelief. Within decades, Judea exploded into full rebellion. By 70 CE, Jerusalem was destroyed. The temple was dismantled, its treasury looted. Rome crushed resistance completely. But something survived. The system remained. Extraction intensified, but the moral story that justified it fractured. Jesus hadn't led an army. He hadn't proposed policy reform. He undermined something deeper, the idea that suffering proved legitimacy. Small communities formed around a different logic. Shared resources, mutual aid, debt relief, identity not tied to land or status. Rome could crush armies. It struggled to erase ideas. By the 4th century, the empire didn't eliminate this alternative framework. It absorbed it. In doing so, it admitted something quietly revolutionary. Power needs moral credibility to survive. The lesson is uncomfortable. Systems don't fall because they are unjust. They fall when people stop believing the stories that explain why injustice is necessary. History doesn't repeat, but it exposes patterns. And once you see how power defends itself through narratives, it becomes impossible to believe those narratives are accidental. If this changed how you see history, subscribe. History doesn't hide the truth. You just have to know where to look.